Hi, welcome back to Code 187. Today we are doing a very highly requested case of the Springfield 3. This case is just so baffling and it had me definitely in some twists and turns. So buckle up because it is about to be a crazy one. In a midwestern town, in a regular neighborhood, on a normal street, is a little white house. It is half white stone and half brown brick, split down the middle in the most decorative way. It has 5 tiny steps to a normal white front door. On the side is an overhang for vehicles. Out front is a circle drive. It's a 3-bedroom, 1 bath, and it is normal. It is typical and more than likely just like your home. 4 walls full of memories and joy. However, on June 6, 1992, something occurred in this house. Something perhaps terrifying. Something happened in this house that even all these years later is still a mystery. Graduation is the time of beginnings and endings. It is a time to start over new and a next chapter in young lives. 2 young, determined graduates walked across the stage on June 6, 1992, ready to begin the next chapter. Stacy McCall was just 18. Her classmates knew her by her big, beautiful smile and long brown hair. Her best friend, Suzanne, was 19 years old, blonde with friendly eyes. The 2 celebrated walking across the stage and on to their adult lives. In the stands, clapping and smiling, was Suzanne's mother, Sherrill. Suzanne and Sherrill were very close. Suzanne even wanted to go into cosmetology just like her mother. They loved hair and makeup and trendy clothes. They loved to giggle together, and their bond was very deep. The night following graduation was a busy one for the teens. They spent it going from party to party and celebrating with friends. The girls had planned a huge trip with friends for the days after. It was the time for the college graduates to get out on their own, and they planned to head to Branson, Missouri that night. However, the girls spent a lot of time at parties with friends and decided to leave for Branson the next day. They both drove their own vehicles to Suzanne's house and decided to crash there for the night together. They left the party around 2:15 a.m. and headed back to sleep the fun off. The next day began the hustle and bustle of college kids making rounds of calling Suzanne and Stacy. No one was getting an answer. Not knowing if they just bailed or if something was wrong, they began calling parents as well. Stacy's mother's phone rang. She could hear the concern in the young teen's voice. She didn't know where Stacy was. A good friend named Kirby and her boyfriend Mike went to the house to see if they were just sleeping. This was around 9 a.m. Kirby and Mike walked up to the house and they noticed there was some glass pieces on the front porch. It looked like it was from the broken glass lamp shade on the porch light. It was shattered, though the tiny light bulb itself was still intact. Kirby didn't want to go to the porch because she was barefoot. Her boyfriend quickly swept up some of the glass away and threw it in the trash so she could walk up to the door. They knocked but got no answer. They looked at each other with concern in their eyes. All 3 cars were parked outside, but no one was answering. They slowly turned the doorknob and the door swung open. Their hearts raced as they walked inside, calling for the girls. But there was no answer. There was only the barking of the family dog, a Yorkshire Terrier named Cinnamon. Cinnamon seemed terrified and glad that people had came to help, but it was so strange that the house was empty and unlocked. It made no sense. Just then, while the couple stood in the empty, dark house, a phone began to ring. Kirby picked it up and put the receiver to her ear. Hello? The call was from a man who was making very inappropriate suggestions to Kirby. She looked at her boyfriend, terrified, and quickly hung up. She barely got any words out of her mouth before the phone rang again. It was the same voice and the same suggestions. She hung up again. She explained that it sounded like a teen boy. She remembered that Suzie was receiving these calls ever since she moved in. It was very creepy, and now the girls were missing, so it seemed even more sinister. The couple left the house, closing the door behind them. They piled in their own vehicle and drove away. They figured the girls would show up soon, and it wasn't anything to worry about. A few hours after this strange visit, Stacy's mother, Janice, decided to go to the house to look for her daughter herself. The girls still hadn't made it to the water park, and Janice was getting worried. When Janice entered the house, a lot of red flags appeared for her. The gnawing feeling in her stomach grew more and more as she walked through the house. She saw that all the ladies' purses were still there. Also, their mother's purse had cash in it, a deposit for $800. It seemed that the women were just there. The mother's cigarettes were left there, next to the unfinished can of cola. There were dirty, used makeup wipes like the girls had gotten ready for bed. Their jewelry and car keys were there. It was extremely eerie that Suzie's TV was still on, showing static, like they had just been there. But then Janice saw something that really terrified her. Sitting perfectly folded were Stacy's clothes from that day, the only ones that she had. She knew then that something was very wrong. The girls were gone, and where would they go without their belongings? She rushed into the living room and called the police from the phone inside the house. After she hung up, she saw the slow, sinister blink of an answering machine. She pressed play. No one has been able to say what was really on the message, but it was dark and very strange. It was so horrible that Janice accidentally pressed delete instead of save on the message, and it was gone. Janice was scared, but it never crossed her mind that her daughter could be gone forever, or that anything bad happened. That just wasn't possible. By the time Janice collected her thoughts, other people started showing up at the house. They were picking up, making coffee, and just waiting for the three women to return. Soon they would walk in the door with a weird explanation. But that didn't happen. Janice's husband convinced her to finally call the police. But she first called non-emergency. This couldn't be that bad, she thought. Police showed up pretty quickly. Police showed up to this normal house on this normal street, and nothing seemed to be amiss from the outside. 3 cars were parked in the circle driveway. Janice frantically told police the whole story, even the part about the message. The police officer ushered the people out of the house. He took the report and called it in. The officer knew something was off. The cars and the belongings weren't adding up, but it was a small neighborhood and a different time. He wrote a note asking the girls to call and cancel the report when they got home. Then he locked the front door and left. He figured the women were grown adults and it was graduation, so they would come back. Just after a few days, the nation took note and the case was turned over to the FBI. The news of the 3 missing women gained a whirlwind of attention in just a few days after the case. Their faces were placed on missing signs, and they were seen across televisions nationwide. It was big news. News stations flooded into the tiny street and the tiny house, and the house that was normal was now famous. Police officers were confused as we are today. Did they walk away, and why? And if someone took them, who and why? It was a complex case with no answers. Police conducted searches everywhere over the town. They gave polygraphs to everyone close to the case, but things just didn't add up. The local newspaper dedicated a tiny box in the corner to count the days since the 3 went missing. It grew and grew. The girls were dubbed the Springfield 3. The investigators narrowed it down to the girls went missing between 2 a.m. and 7:30 a.m. that morning. However, they still have no DNA and no leads in this case. Over the years now since the girls went missing, over 5,000 tips have came into investigators. There has been movies, books, documentaries, and now true crime sleuths to find out answers. The most captivating part of this case was everything seemed normal except they were gone. I think this is what makes looking for a suspect so hard. There was no evidence. One of the biggest suspects in this case came just because of suspicion. A man named Robert Craig Cox was on police's mind very quickly. Before the disappearance, Robert unalived a woman in Florida. However, that was overturned. He also confessed to crimes like kidnapping and assault. After his unaliving conviction was overturned, he moved to Springfield. So police, of course, wanted to talk to him and his girlfriend, who provided an alibi. And he himself didn't say much. However, years later, the girlfriend said she lied, and when police went to interview him, he, quote, said, "I know that they are dead. I'll say that, and I know that." This sounds like a confession to me, but with this case, there was no evidence to prove it in court. And get this, Robert will be eligible for parole in 2025. Yeah, like next year. There were many people close to the girls, and they were interviewed, vetted, and then cleared. Some ex-boyfriends, and even Suzanne's older brother, but they didn't get any closer to solving this case. A flood of tips came in after airings of TV shows and all the news coverage. A sketch was made of a man that had been seen near the home, but no new leads came from that. A witness was said to believe she saw one of the women in a van with a man. It was a Dodge green van, but witness testimonies are hard to nail down. In 2007, a reporter named Kathy Bartt said that she had a tip that there were 3 and they were buried underneath a parking garage. Police didn't seem to follow up on this, so she got someone with a device that had ground-penetrating radar that they used on the garage. They did see 3 shapes that could have been the 3, but there wasn't enough real evidence for anyone to dig up that garage. Some people still do think they ran away on their own accord, but to me, this theory is very unlikely. They didn't take anything. The 2 just graduated and had plans, and this just didn't add up. Could it have been a police officer or someone who was impersonating a cop? They would have gotten the girls to go with them very easily, and that is one circulating theory online. I go back to my theory on the porch light. Was someone looking for a spare key and it broke? I tend to think it was an intruder. I think it was someone who didn't know them. I think the theory of Robert Cox looks pretty good, and that is very frightening. We just don't know. This one makes my stomach turn. I can't even think about how confusing this is. Nothing truly makes sense, and it may never make sense, and that is why it's so hard with this type of case. What is your theory on the Springfield 3? Who do you think did it, and why did they do it? And how did they get away with it for so long? Please tell me in the comments below, and I will be seeing you guys next time.